Aileen was a princess unlike any other, but not for reasons you might think. In the dazzling kingdom of Alia, where the royal family was loved and celebrated, Aileen was the one person nobody noticed. Her crown sparkled, her gown shimmered, but it was as if she didn't exist. "Do I look all right?" she'd ask, her voice barely louder than a whisper. Her parents, lively and adored by all, would glance her way briefly before getting swept up in their duties. Even on her birthday, she was just forgotten. And then, one night, everything changed. A mysterious figure, cloaked in shadows, emerged from the darkness. His name was Malachar, a sorcerer with a cunning smile and words that cut deep. "No one truly sees you, do they?" he whispered, his voice dripping with sympathy. Aileen felt her heart sink. How could he know? The fears she kept buried were now laid bare. "Maybe," she said hesitantly, "if I were really invisible, they'd finally notice I was gone." Before she could take back her words, Malachar raised his hand, and a dark mist swirled around her. Aileen screamed, but it was too late. When she rushed to her parents, crying and waving her hands, they didn't flinch. They didn't even look at her. "Mother, father, please, it's me," she shouted, her voice cracking. But her words passed through them, like wind through empty halls. She stumbled back, horrified. Malachar's cruel laugh echoed in her ears. "They forgot you long before my spell. I just made it real." And so, Aileen became invisible, completely unseen, unheard, and forgotten by the world. Days turned into weeks. She screamed until her voice gave out. She wandered the castle, longing for someone, anyone, to remember her. The weight of despair crushed her spirit. "How can I break this? What if no one ever sees me again?" she whispered to herself, her reflection now only a memory. Just when she was ready to give up, a glimmer of hope appeared in the form of Anara, an eccentric and powerful sorceress who could see her. "You're not the first Malachar has cursed," Anara said, her voice steady yet filled with sorrow. "And you won't be the last unless we stop him." From her robes, she revealed a shard of an ancient relic, the Shadow Mirror, a source of immense power. "Take this. It's your key to finding the mirror and ending the curse, but beware. Malachar won't make it easy for you." The words hung in the air, heavy with foreboding. Aileen's hands trembled as she held the shard. Could she really face Malachar? Could she risk failure and eternal invisibility? But something inside her stirred, a flicker of courage she hadn't felt in years. As Aileen stepped into the eerie forest of whispers, shadows danced, and unseen whispers taunted her. The path ahead was filled with danger, but there was no turning back now. Somewhere in the darkness, Malachar was waiting. And he knew she was coming. Would Aileen find the strength to reclaim her place in the world, or would she fade into the shadows forever? The Forest of Whispers was unlike anything Aileen had ever seen. The trees seemed alive, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Strange whispers echoed through the air, soft and menacing, as if the forest itself was speaking to her. "Turn back, you'll fail, he's watching," the voices clawed at her mind, making her question every step she took. Aileen clutched the shard tightly, her only source of light in the suffocating darkness. "I can do this," she murmured to herself, though her voice wavered. Every step deeper into the forest felt like an eternity. The air grew colder, heavier, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. Suddenly, a soft giggle broke the silence. Then another. Before Aileen could react, tiny glowing figures darted out from the trees. Fairies. But these weren't the sweet, gentle creatures she'd read about in her books. Their laughter was sharp, mocking, and their glowing wings flickered like fireflies on the verge of burning out. "An invisible one. How fun!" one of them shrieked, circling her head. Another tugged at her hair, while a third yanked on her cloak. "Let me go," Aileen cried, swatting at them, but they only laughed harder. "Oh, poor little princess, lost and all alone," one sneered, her voice dripping with fake pity. "Do you really think you'll make it out of here?" Aileen tried to run, but the fairies swarmed her, pulling and tugging, their high-pitched voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony. "Stop it. I don't have time for this," she shouted, tears stinging her eyes. At that moment, the shard in her hand began to glow faintly. The fairies recoiled, hissing and scattering back into the shadows. "You won't last long, princess," one of them spat before disappearing completely. Panting, Aileen pressed her back against a tree to catch her breath. Her heart pounded in her chest as doubts began to creep in. What if they were right? What if she couldn't do this? But then she remembered Anara's words. Asterisk, the shard will guide you when you feel lost. Asterisk, gathering her courage, she stood tall and pressed forward. The deeper she went, the stranger the forest became. The trees seemed to shift and change, their trunks twisting into grotesque shapes. A thick fog rolled in, obscuring her path. Aileen began to notice faint glimmers of light ahead, but every time she followed them, she found herself back in the same clearing. Over and over again, the forest seemed to mock her efforts. Exhausted and frustrated, she fell to her knees. "I'll never get out of here," she whispered, her voice breaking. But then she heard a new voice, low and menacing, yet eerily calm. "Giving up so soon, little princess?" Her blood ran cold. She looked around, but there was no one in sight. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice shaking. The voice laughed, a sound that sent shivers down her spine. "You already know who I am. Malachar." He was watching her, toying with her, and she knew he wouldn't stop until he broke her completely. Aileen's heart raced as Malachar's voice echoed through the forest, blending with the whispers of the trees. She clutched the shard tighter, its faint glow her only comfort in the consuming darkness. "What do you want from me?" she shouted, spinning around, desperate to find the source of the voice. But there was no one, just the endless shadows and the oppressive fog. "What I want?" Malachar's laugh cut through the silence, cold and cruel. "I want you to see the truth, little princess. The truth you've been running from your entire life." His words wrapped around her like vines, pulling at her fears and insecurities. "You were never meant to be seen. They've always ignored you because you don't matter. And you know it."
"No."
"That's not true," Aileen yelled, her voice shaking with both fear and defiance. But doubt crept into her mind like a poison. What if he was right? What if she really had been invisible all along, even before his curse? The fog thickened, and shapes began to form within it, ghostly figures of her parents, her friends, the people of the kingdom. They walked past her, their faces blank and indifferent. "Mother, father, please," she cried, reaching out to them. But her hands passed through their forms like smoke. "They don't see you." "They never did," Malachar's voice whispered, closer now. The figures turned, their empty eyes staring right through her. "Stop it," she screamed, covering her ears. "This isn't real." "Oh, but it feels real, doesn't it?" Malachar sneered. "Just like the way they ignored you on your birthday, the way they forgot your name. It's all real, Aileen. I'm just showing you what you've always known deep down." Tears streamed down her face as she fell to her knees. The shard in her hand dimmed, its light flickering like a dying flame. She was on the verge of giving up, of letting Malachar's words consume her, when she felt a faint warmth in her palm. "Anara," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She closed her eyes and focused on the shard, trying to remember the sorceress's encouraging words. "The shard will guide you when you feel lost." Taking a deep breath, she pushed herself to her feet. "You're wrong, Malachar," she said, her voice steadier now. "I'm not invisible. Not to everyone." The shard glowed brighter, piercing through the fog. The ghostly figures faded away, and the oppressive whispers grew distant. Malachar's voice, once so overpowering, was now laced with irritation. "You think a little light can save you?" he roared. "You've barely scratched the surface of what lies ahead." Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet trembled. Roots erupted from the earth, twisting and writhing like snakes, trying to ensnare her. Aileen dodged and stumbled, clutching the shard as it pulsed with energy. The forest seemed determined to keep her trapped, but she refused to stop. Somewhere ahead, past the chaos and danger, lay the shadow mirror. And Aileen knew she had to reach it, no matter the cost. Aileen ran through the forest as the roots chased her, twisting and snapping like living creatures desperate to pull her under. The shard in her hand glowed brighter with every step, cutting through the fog and guiding her forward. But the forest wasn't letting her go so easily. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper, and every sound seemed amplified. The crunch of leaves underfoot, the whisper of wind, the beating of her heart. "Do you really think you can escape me?" Malakar's voice boomed, echoing from everywhere and nowhere at once. His tone was calm, but there was an edge of frustration beneath it. Aileen didn't answer. She couldn't let him get inside her head again. Suddenly, the path ahead split into three. Each trail looked identical, twisting into the darkness. She hesitated, panic setting in as she glanced between them. "Which way do I go?" she whispered to herself, gripping the shard tighter. The glow from the shard pulsed faintly, pointing toward the middle path. Without another thought, she sprinted forward, ignoring the sound of the other trails closing behind her, the trees snapping together like jaws. The ground beneath her feet felt uneven, almost as if it were alive. She stumbled but caught herself, refusing to stop. She could feel the shard pulling her, its magic growing stronger with every step. But Malakar wasn't done with her yet. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent, filling her mind with doubts. "You're not strong enough. You'll fail. You'll never be seen." The voices twisted and multiplied, drowning out her thoughts. "Stop it. Leave me alone," she screamed, her voice echoing through the trees. But the whispers only grew louder, transforming into laughter, cold, cruel, and relentless. Her knees buckled, and she fell to the ground, clutching her head as tears streamed down her face. "I can't do this. I'm not strong enough." Then, amidst the chaos, she heard another voice. Soft, steady, and familiar. "You're stronger than you think, Aileen. They just might see a princess who's more than her crown." Anara's words cut through the noise like a beacon of hope. Aileen took a shaky breath, wiping her tears as she stood. "No," she said firmly, her voice growing stronger. "I won't let you win, Malakar." The shard in her hand flared with light, brighter than it had ever been. The whispers stopped abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence. The forest around her seemed to hold its breath as the path ahead cleared, revealing a shimmering lake bathed in an unnatural glow. At the center of the lake stood the shadow mirror, dark and foreboding. Its surface rippled like liquid, reflecting not the forest around it, but a swirling void of shadows. Aileen's heart pounded as she stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the mirror. But before she could reach it, Malakar appeared, his form materializing out of the shadows. His eyes gleamed with malice, and a twisted smile spread across his face. "You've come so far, little princess," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "But this is where your journey ends." The air grew thick with dark energy as Malakar raised his hands, shadows swirling around him like a storm. Aileen's grip on the shard tightened as she faced him, her fear and determination clashing within her. She knew this was it, the final test. But could she truly face him and win? The light from the shard surged into the shadow mirror, crackling with power as the dark glass began to fracture. Aileen gritted her teeth, feeling the energy pulse through her, as though the mirror itself was fighting back. "This ends now," she shouted, her voice ringing through the clearing. Malakar roared in anger, his form flickering like a shadow caught in the wind. "You think you've won?" he bellowed, his voice shaking the air around her. The shards of the mirror shimmered as cracks spread across its surface. The dark energy swirling around Malakar grew wild and desperate, lashing out at Aileen. But she stood firm, holding the shard like a beacon of light. "You can't take what I've found," Aileen said, her voice calm and resolute. "You can't take my courage, my voice, or the love I carry in my heart." The mirror let out a deafening crack as it shattered completely, its pieces dissolving into brilliant light. The energy erupted outward, swallowing Malakar in its radiance. He screamed, his shadowy form disintegrating into nothingness. The clearing fell silent, the oppressive weight of his presence finally gone. Aileen gasped for breath, her knees buckling as she fell to the ground. The forest around her began to transform. The twisted trees straightened, their bark glowing with a soft, warm light. The fog lifted, revealing a sky full of stars. The entire forest seemed to exhale, free from the darkness that had plagued it for so long. But then, something unexpected happened. The glowing remnants of the mirror began to coalesce, swirling together in the air. Aileen's eyes widened as the light formed a figure, a woman, regal and ethereal, with a crown of stars resting upon her head. Who are you?" Aileen asked, her voice trembling. The figure smiled, her voice gentle yet commanding. "I am the keeper of reflections, the guardian of the shadow mirror. You have freed me, brave princess, and in doing so, you have freed yourself." Aileen's heart raced. But why did the mirror exist in the first place? Why did it hold so much darkness? The keeper's expression grew somber. The mirror does not create darkness. It reflects what already exists within us. It showed Malachar his greed, his thirst for power, and he allowed it to consume him. But you saw your fears, your doubts, and chose to rise above them. That is why you succeeded where others failed. As the keeper spoke, the light around her began to fade. Aileen panicked. "Wait. What happens now?" The keeper's voice echoed softly. "You are stronger than you know, Aileen. Remember, the greatest light comes from within." And with that, she vanished, leaving only a faint glow in the clearing. Aileen stood alone, her reflection shimmering in the still waters of the lake. For the first time, she didn't feel invisible. She saw herself, truly saw herself, as someone brave, strong, and worthy. As she turned to leave the forest, the light of the shard lingered in her hand, a reminder of her journey and the courage she had found. But as she stepped out of the clearing, a faint whisper echoed behind her. Every reflection tells a story, but not every story is over. Aileen emerged from the forest, the glow of the shard fading into a faint warmth against her palm. The air felt lighter, and for the first time in what seemed like forever, she could see the world clearly. The oppressive shadows were gone, replaced by a soft golden dawn breaking over the horizon. She paused at the edge of the trees, her heart still racing from everything she had faced. She had done it. She had defeated Malachar and shattered the shadow mirror. But more importantly, she had found something she never thought she would, herself. The journey back to the kingdom was quieter than she expected, but it gave her time to reflect. The shard, now just a small, dull fragment, rested in her pocket. It no longer glowed, but its weight reminded her of everything she had endured. She thought of Anara, the witches, and even the mischievous fairies. Each of them had played a part in her story. Their belief in her had given her strength, but it was her own courage that had carried her through. As she approached the castle gates, she hesitated. Would they see her now? Would her parents remember her? She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The bustling castle halls felt strange, almost unfamiliar after her time in the forest. Servants moved about, oblivious to her presence at first, until one stopped, his eyes widening. "Princess Aileen," he exclaimed, dropping the tray he was holding. The clatter echoed through the hall, drawing everyone's attention. Heads turned, and a murmur spread like wildfire. "She's back." Her parents appeared at the top of the grand staircase, their faces filled with shock and relief. "Aileen," her mother cried, rushing down to embrace her. Her father followed, his usually stoic expression softened with emotion. We thought we'd lost you forever," he said, his voice breaking. Aileen felt tears well up as she hugged them both. "I thought so too," she admitted. "But I found my way back. And I've realized something. I was never truly invisible. I just needed to believe in myself." The days that followed were filled with joy and celebration. The kingdom, now free from Malachar's lingering darkness, felt alive again. People spoke of Aileen's bravery, of how she had faced the shadow mirror and broken its power. For the first time, she was not just a princess. They saw her as a hero. But even amidst the happiness, Aileen couldn't forget the keeper's final words. Every reflection tells a story, but not every story is over. The shard sat on her bedside table, a silent reminder of the challenges she had faced and the strength she had found. As she stood on the castle balcony one evening, looking out at the glowing kingdom, she smiled. Her journey had changed her, but it had also given her purpose. She would no longer retreat into the shadows. Instead, she would stand tall and shine her light, not just for herself, but for those who felt unseen and unheard. The invisible princess was invisible no more. Her story was one of courage, resilience, and self-discovery, a story that would inspire others for generations to come.